Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our RT series. Thank you all for joining what is a very late evening in Asia. Good afternoon to those in Europe and good morning to those in the Americas. As we started last month, this is our RT series, a monthly content series bringing to you some of the latest issues on sustainable palm oil. My name is Dan Strecce. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement for the RSPO. Today, I'll be acting as your MC. You were probably expecting someone else. Inka van der Sluis, our Director of Market Transformation, was intended to be here, but she had an issue come up that she had to take care of, an emergency, so I'm going to fill in. I don't think I'll do as good of a job as Inka would have done. This is an issue, the issue of national initiatives, that is very close to her heart. Inka has helped steward the growth of Europe on a small but mighty team with something like 2,400 members to 3 or 4 folks in the market. And she has recently just taken on the role of Director of Market Transformation, where she'll be leading and taking this experience and this business development experience and growth and using it across the globe, and particularly focusing on our big markets, Indonesia, Malaysia, China, India, and of course, still making sure that we take care of our other markets like the Americas, South Asia, Africa, and others. So we do have some housekeeping that we need to take care of. And I think first what we should do is just reflect again, as we did last month, to make sure that we acknowledge that the new normal is not a good normal, and that there's folks being impacted by this pandemic across the globe. In terms of housekeeping rules specifically, we ask that you please enter your name into the Zoom so that we can know what your name is and your organization as we take Q&A. The way we have established this panel today, we'll actually have about 30 minutes for Q&A. We're not going to be too slide heavy. So we're excited to have a very interactive panel today, and I encourage you to put your questions into the Q&A. All participants are automatically set to mute, as we already have almost 90 people on the line. We don't want to have dogs barking and things in the background. Also, we recommend that you close any unneeded internet browsers or email applications so that you can focus on the content, and also just make sure you get the best presentation possible. And I think, just as we have to acknowledge on all of these calls, there may be children walking by to get a book, or a dog barking, or other types of life happening in the background, and we apologize for that in advance. But it is the normal that we deal with on a daily basis now. So with those housekeeping rules, I do want to just go over the antitrust, a quick reminder on the antitrust. The RSPO refers to its antitrust guidelines for the conduct of all of our meetings, virtual presentations, and conference calls. As a reminder, there shouldn't be any discussion of specific selling or buying of materials, pricing, or any joint ventures, future or collusive actions such as excluding or choosing a supplier or geographies. All commentary today is limited to the current or historical activity. Any decision you reach from today's meeting or discussed in this meeting is an individual decision based on your own investigation and judgment. So with that out of the way, I hope that you all get some valuable insights from our speakers today, and I thank you for joining us. So today's panel, we're going to explore the role of national initiatives. in driving transformative change in the demand of supply and demand, the supply and demand of certified sustainable palm oil, and also how that impacts these markets. Does it raise the bar and create that base either for demand or for production of CSPO, or certified sustainable palm oil? When we look at this issue, with the market and regulatory developments, be it the EU due diligence, the UK due diligence, there's some legislation in the US also pending. When we look at this, there's a lot of different levers that can be pulled, whether it's from a business side or a regulatory side. National initiatives provide a stimulating, safe space for collective dialogue and action, working together as consumers, linking to the producers. We can develop collaborative approaches, global impact with long-term resilient, sustainable supply chains, and transformative change can be achieved. I have personal experience with this, as when I was working in the North American markets specifically, I was part of an initiative to help facilitate the North American Sustainable Palm Oil Network. And what we've seen is the North American market has seen tremendous amount of growth since those initial meetings, probably in Bangkok in 2016. Additionally, we've seen great initiatives like the Amsterdam Declaration, which is more of a government-led initiative, all the way to CSPO, which is the China Sustainable Palm Oil Association, or ISPOC, the India Sustainable Palm Oil Coalition. All of these different organizations, these different initiatives can really help move the market, creating that safe space, if you will, for people to have this dialogue about palm oil. Let's be honest, not everyone wants to talk about sustainable palm oil. Not every company wants to admit that they're using palm oil. We have to create an enabling environment to help these conversations take place. With that level set, I'm excited to have this panel today. Today we're joined by Emily Fripp of Ethica, who is representing the UK Sustainable Palm Oil Initiative. We're also joined by Margot Logman of the European Palm Oil Alliance, and Andreas Null of FONAP, or the German Forum for Sustainable Palm Oil. With that, we're going to start off with some short presentations, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Emily for our first short presentation.
Great, thank you, Dan, and thank you for that introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today, and thank you, RSPO, for hosting this meeting. It's something that Margot, myself, and Andreas are very keen to sort of showcase the work that we're doing and how it can be of importance in this global platform. So if we move forward onto the slides, my name's Emily Fripp, and we are the facilitator. So Ethica is the facilitator for the UK Sustainable Palm Oil Initiative. And I'm just going to say a couple of words about what that is and what we've been up to, and then I'll hand back. On the next slide, it sort of talks through our history a bit. So we were established in 2012 by UK government. So we have UK government funding, which makes us slightly different to some of the other European national initiatives, to work and be a mechanism for helping the government to meet its commitment of 100% CSPO by 2015. We then reconvened and aligned ourselves with the Amsterdam Declaration goal of 100% by 2020. We still have that as a sort of overarching goal, but we wanted to sort of broaden our focus moving forward from 2020, because there's a lot going on in this space, a lot of changing dynamics and the views. You know, back in 2012, it was about cleaning up your own supply chain. Now it's about having an impact beyond your supply chain and working with the bigger base of your producers and also across more of your consumer base. And that's kind of where our work is now focusing its attention. So we really want to be thinking about sustainable and resilient supplies of palm oil to the UK. So it's broader than where we've gone. We are an industry-led group. So we've come together as industry. We cover a wide array. We cover the whole of the UK. So unlike others, which tend to be sort of retail only, we're actually aim to be the entire UK base of consumers, from the refiners and the importers through to end users, some small restaurant chains, fish and chip shops, manufacturing, and government, because they fund us, but they're also important purchasers. So they do have a role to play in this space. We work through associations, which enables us to have a greater outreach and impact to the whole of the industry. So that's quite important for us to have that safe space, as you were talking about, Dan, and how we can sort of share lessons between those making progress to those where they might be further behind on the journey and wanting to get more involved. So how have we been doing? And on the next slide, I'll show you sort of just a picture of where we've got to over the last 10 years. You can see from this that the volume of imports that we bring in terms of our refined and crude sort of palm oil coming in as palm oil and palm kernel oil is fairly static over a 10-year period. The percentage that is classified as certified sustainable palm oil has grown over that 10-year period significantly, but has plateaued in the last few years. And that's a sort of symptom of a changing market. So we're going from sort of importing crude to more refined and more processed products. And that also doesn't, what sort of doesn't show on the graph is that what comes in, we know, is still covered under an NDPE policy or some kind of company commitment. So it's more of an unknown factor, that pale pink color, rather than a necessarily this is unsustainable. What that graph also doesn't pick up on is the imports we get through embedded and from animal feed. So, but we're keen to maintain this momentum and move forward. So we will be focusing very much so on two sectors which don't have that interface, perhaps with the refiner or the producer, or with a consumer and civil society. So they've not had that same drive for change, but they're still a really important part of the market in terms of creating the pull through from the refiners and showing there really is a need for sustainable and certified palm oil. So we're going to be working with the out-of-home sector and with the animal feed sector. Animal feed is interesting and new, and it is a topic that across EPOA and the national initiatives we're all now talking about, especially when there's pending market regulations and policies, because some of it is coming in as a byproduct from Indonesia and elsewhere, and it's something we've got to understand more about and understand how that supply chain works and engage with them more. We also want to move into having a different conversation around palm oil. So on the next slide, just we've tended to be very driven about sort of the anti-palm message and palm oil's bad and zero palm. And we've been quite defensive about that over the last few years. And we've decided that this year is a really important year. You know, we're coming out of this pandemic. We've got this view for the link between biodiversity and nature and our health as a planet and as people. And economics is really important, as we all know the implications of when this all goes wrong. So we want to take this opportunity to talk this year about the positive impact that sustainable palm oil can have on wildlife, people and the planet, and take advantage of some of these big events, international conversations that are taking place. And lastly, I just wanted to just re-emphasize that in our minds, on the last slide, we've got sort of a three-pronged role, we feel, as an initiative. If we go to the last slide, and then I can run it. We've got three sort of main aims here. One, we come together as a whole industry group and we're sharing ideas, safe space, dialogue, change. We can't do it alone. UK is small in this market, even smaller now that we're not part of the European Union sort of, the trading platform. So we need to work with others. We need to work with our demand side partners. We need to work across Europe. And we need to work with China and India. So it's great to hear, you know, the momentum going in India and China and elsewhere. We have to do this together with producers. We can't do this in isolation. This isn't a dictatorship coming from the UK or Europe. We can only make progress and shift the debate forward by working with our partners. So we want to be a platform to engage with partners in producing countries as well. And I can come back and explore those in more detail when we get into the Q&A session. But without further ado, Dan, back to you for now.
Great. Thank you, Emily, for that. What really struck me, what you were talking about, was this isn't a dictatorship, that this has to be kind of a two-way dialogue. And I think that's really, really important point. And, again, just looking back on some of my North American experience with the NASPON group, was that people wanted to learn about the issue. They wanted to learn how to source the material, obviously, but they also wanted to figure out how they could help get involved and how they could help the producers that were trying to do it the right way. And I think that's something that we have to remember, is that this shouldn't just be a top-down approach to the fact that even the structure of your coalition is really done holistically. Everyone's at the table, just kind of like a mini RSPO. So I think that's really important, is that two-way dialogue, so that's not just someone yelling in one direction. Yeah. It's that feedback loop, which is really important. So that's fantastic. We are having a little bit of technical difficulty with Andreas, but luckily Margot is going to be going next for us in their interim, so while we work that out. It's never a webinar these days without some sort of issue, right? So Margot, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you before I read Andreas's slides and play the role of Andreas later. Just kidding. We'll work it out, hopefully. So Margot, you have the floor. Oh, you're on mute. Always have to say that once at least during a webinar as well.
Okay, now you can hear me?
Perfect.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you, RSPO, Dan, for giving me and us the opportunity. I think this is a very important topic, both the national initiatives and their role, but also raising the bar and raising the base, because in the end, we move all together. Just a bit background, if we can move to the first slide, or my second slide, I think, overall. Yeah, so who is EPOA? Not everybody may be familiar to the European Palm Oil Alliance. We have evolved from the Dutch Alliance on Sustainable Palm Oil, and we actually filled a gap in the beginning to give more information on palm oil and health. But in the course of time, the debate in Europe polarized a lot. And yeah, slowly and surely we evolved. We got more members on board. We started to work more closely together with the national initiatives. First, mainly Germany, France, and later on Italy and the other national initiatives that have been initiated in the last few years. And my experience is first that they are great people. They're amazing people, but they all have a shared commitment. And actually, honestly, at EPOA, we did not have at the time. That's because we have so many different members, but also we were working closely with Asia at that time. So I'm very proud to say that at least a few years ago, we had a very strong commitment, and it made it much more easy for us to communicate and to work together in the market. So all our members have a commitment to supply sustainable palm oil, certified sustainable palm oil of RSPO, and at that time it was still the RSPO Plus, but now it's the RSPO certification. And they all have an NDPE commitment, so no deforestation, no development on peatland, and no exploitation. That already goes beyond what is needed to transform the market in Europe, but we will talk about that later. So we have 7 members at the moment, a mix of refiners and growers. But if we can move, just to mention, why is this so important to the refiners? Of course, it's their product and it's their market, but also what I sense from the discussions when we set up this new commitment, they really believe in palm oil, that it's a key food ingredient that feeds the world, but that it can also, if it's produced sustainably, can also make a big difference in the lives of people, but also in making sure that the whole world is sustained, is sustainably is looking at a more sustainable future, let's put it that way. And what is also interesting is that they were all very passionate to completely transform the market in Europe. So not a little bit, not 60%, but really 100%. Next slide, please. Yeah, how do we do that? It's difficult. We have only 7 members, but the interesting part is, and already Emily mentioned it a little bit, we all have the same goal. We all have the same willingness to transform the market to more sustainable supply chains. We actually have very similar goals. We're organized differently, but we work with the certification schemes like the RSPO. We work with NGOs. We work together with the national initiatives. We work with the Amsterdam Declaration Partnership. So we actually are through that cooperation, but also through physical support, we try to help transform the market. And if you can look at the base, these are not all companies that we work with, but obviously they are member of RSPO, most of them are, and have their own projects and initiatives. But it's really through this coordination of action and cooperation and trust mainly that we, I believe, can make a difference. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then my last slide, and the rest will come through the discussions, is I'm very proud to say that overall, so altogether, Europe is now importing 86% of sustainable palm oil for food, feed, and oleochemicals. And that is largely due to the work of the national initiatives. Not only because they are all buying certified sustainable palm oil, most of them are RSPO members, but we see this polarization in the debate, and this safe space that you mentioned is actually crucial to get the heat of the discussion, to get better understanding, and then to go back to the focus of the common goal of certified sustainable palm oil. And I think without the national initiatives, so with all the different initiatives separately and not a coordinated action, we would never have achieved what we have achieved here. So, thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Margot. And one of the things that I thought that was really interesting that you mentioned is about the polarization of the issue. That there's a lot of these, like what we would call black and white solutions presented, and that despite that, you've still achieved 86% in 2019 is really impressive. And I guess we'll dive into that a little bit more during the questions. We are trying to have Andreas now dial in by phone, but I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pull up the slides. I will do my best to kind of run through them and kind of set the stage for our conversation, because I think really kind of taking a look at FONAP and looking at what has been done in Germany is a good way to kind of set the stage as kind of a case study for what we're going to discuss in our Q&A portion as well. So for those of you that are not aware, the FONAP is, sounds like Andreas might be joining. If you bear with us for 2 seconds, we'll just get that set up real quick. But like many of these coalitions around the globe, FONAP is one of the more diverse ones. If we look at the membership list of how they have a lot of those different categories. To Emily's point earlier, it's not just one category taking the lead. Instead, it's a multi-stakeholder process. Andreas, I'm not sure if you can hear me. This is Dan Strecce, Director of Outreach and Engagement for the RSPO. We have just queued up your first slide. Welcome, and sorry you had some technical issues joining.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. And yeah, apologies on my behalf for having these technical difficulties. Now I join you via phone, and I'm very happy that I can still join you for this session.
Great. So because you're dialing in by phone, if you can just give us a verbal cue to change slides, and we'll go ahead. Right now, we're on the main slide with the different stakeholder categories that you have in FONAP.
All right, so it seems I'm coming just right in time. Thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, we are a multi-stakeholder platform, and as such, we are very happy that indeed we do see so many different actors joining our FONAP association. You can see that we have 2 ministries from the government, ranging to a handful of NGOs, also international NGOs. We have a couple of certification bodies, one certification team, consultant companies. We have a huge array of organizations from the food industry. We have some of the leading retailers in Germany, also some of them operating internationally. And we do have a lot of organizations working in the cleaning agents, detergents, cosmetics sector, which is of particular interest to us, as well as some associations, industry associations. And then again, we have some highly specialized organizations working, for instance, in the steel sector, where you would not necessarily expect the use of palm oil. And that all is rounded with our group of supporters, a specific category of membership, and their role is principally to support the other members in meeting the FONAP requirements. So please go on to the next slide. So we are talking now about FONAP's main objectives, right?
Yeah,
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, principally, FONAP has been set up with a twofold ambition. And one is, of course, being a national initiative with the aim to increase the uptake of sustainable certified palm oil in our regional market with a focus on Germany. And that goes hand in hand with developing materials for consumer information and engaging in stakeholder dialogue. And the second major aim is we are currently accepting 4 international recognized certification systems as a guarantee or proof for sustainable palm oil production, and still are of the opinion that all of them have still some room for improvement. So our second major objective is to influence and to be part of processes which help those systems improving. Next slide, please.
Okay.
What have we achieved in recent years? Yeah, thank you. This is a very brief vision on some key outputs we have achieved in recent years. And of course, that formally starts with the inception of FONAP back in 2015. We do regularly, that means any second year, publish market studies with enjoying a great level of detail in different market sectors. So the most recent one, based on figures from 2019, we have just published by the end of last year. We are, as I mentioned, engaged in these diverse processes to further improve certification systems, such as the PLC review process, the most recent one, 2017-18, with RSPO. But also, if possibility arises, we are working with other schemes. We have passed a resolution towards transparency with ISCC once a couple of years back. Since 2018, we enjoy that our members have taken another level of commitment in financing solely a small holder project with our partner Wild Asia in Malaysia. And that is now in its current second phase. And we are all very happy to see the processes which we went through and the achievements made so far. We are regularly present at diverse meetings and conferences. This is one of the major conferences in Germany, and we have been there the last 2 years. And we, as I mentioned before, engage also in developing information materials for consumers, but also for market participants. And we have last year published a handout specifically on the complexities of handling sustainably certified derivatives and fractions of palm oil and palm kernel oil. And yeah, this is embedded in a range of ongoing processes. We have this add-on criteria, which we are currently revamping, so to speak. We have 5 active working groups where our members sit down, exchange across any kind of borders. in a very open way and come to solutions to, for instance, meet the FONAP membership requirements, but also to tackle other obstacles and challenges, sometimes relating to certification criteria, sometimes to communication. It's a wide array of topics we talk about. And as an association, of course, we have to follow by the rules of our statutes. So now and then they also get amended, and this is part and parcel of what we do. Yeah, that's, I think, in short so far. And then we can maybe quickly run to the next slide. Leading the market transformation as far as we are concerned here in Germany. This gives you an overview about what we have achieved in real change in the market. And the most recent figures are from 2019. And you can see that when it comes to palm kernel oil, currently 63% of the palm kernel oil used in the voluntary market sectors. That means these are all sectors except for the biofuel sector, because this one's regulated. This is now 63%, and when we talk about palm oil, we are under the same conditions at 83%. So still a bit away from the 100% aim, but we can see that we are making progress. And I mean, on the other hand side, it's still good that we have still something to do. And we see that we are on the right path, and we will continue to further push for an increased uptake of CSPO.
Great, thanks for that.
And I think that's it in short. For anybody asking or wanting more information, please, there is our homepage, and of course you can reach out to us via emails as well.
Great, thanks for that, Andreas. Thanks for persevering through the non-Zoom capability or compatibility sometimes that we have to deal with in these days. So I guess with that, let's do a little Q&A, and just a quick reminder to our audience that I'd love to get some questions. I see a couple have come in, but we're going to start out with some facilitated questions while you type away there as the audience. So why don't Emily, I'm going to start with you, and then everyone, Margot and Andreas, feel free to jump in here. What are the major issues facing members of each national interpretive in your experience? And where's the gap in driving certified sustainable palm oil?
Yeah, I think we're all in a sort of similar place where the easy bit's kind of almost been done, and now we need to kind of work on the harder aspects. From the UK, I mean, we've seen comments coming in for Margot and looking at the volumes coming to Europe that are certified or sustainable palm oil and covered under a policy. So we're pretty confident that a majority of what comes into the UK market is covered by some policy, but there's still work to be done. And for us, it's the parts of the out-of-home sector, some of the food service, some of the sort of manufacturers, and smaller, medium-sized. Some people are engaged in the debate, but perhaps are unaware, or they're not sort of necessarily being proactive in demanding and talking about sustainable palm oil. Like you said before, it's kind of if you're not actively engaged in it, you tend to sort of try and avoid even mentioning that you've got palm oil in your food or in your frying oils and in your restaurants. But actually we feel it's something that you should be talking about, and you should be confident to talk about it with your consumers and within your own supply chain. So there's that out of home side, and then the palm kernel expeller, so the animal feed. So we know that some of the animal feed going into our dairy, we know that that's covered under a certification, CSPO, but there's some that's coming in that's less clear where it comes from. And that supply chain, when you're back in Indonesia, it's the palm kernel expeller, the meal, it's a byproduct, it's a bit more complicated. And to us, that's an area that we really want to strengthen our work on, working both with those who are buying it, but also those in the producer side. So it's a sort of, it's part that needs exploring. I know the rest of Europe, we're all thinking about how to engage and do more on this sector, but that will involve working with Indonesia and the UK's point of view, because that's where a significant amount of our PKE comes from. So we will need to find out and work with our Indonesian partners on that. I think the other ongoing debate is always around the sort of the negative messaging around palm oil and how can we turn that into a positive story and talk more confidently about it. There's always this sort of, it's easier to label a product as palm oil free than it is to actually label it sustainable palm oil for various reasons. And, you know, they normally have a big sticker on the front of a pack, whereas sustainable palm oil might be listed within an ingredient. So how can we change consumer perception? And that's one of our ongoing challenges within the UK market. But I'll stop there and let Andreas and Margot jump in if I can, Dan. And we're all sort of in the same boat, I think. Great.
Margot, Andreas.
Yeah, can I step in?
Sure.
Thank you, Emily. I think that's a clear picture. I think what we are, you could say it's a success, as Emily said. We're at 86%. We have gaps to close, which are difficult to close because it's a more complex area than straightforward use for food. But what we're facing now is that companies that have already come a long way are stepping out of palm oil. So the negative debate is influencing the consumer choice in such a way that it's actually negatively impacting even the front runners in the market. And I think that's a very tricky situation. You can say they're just following the market. They respond to the what the consumers think or need, but I dare to say it's also a lack of leadership, because if you're so much you've gone so far to go sustainable with all your commodities, including palm oil, then I think, especially since we have now 40 national initiatives, you should try to take the last step and do that together with the other companies to show how important this is. It's a bit of a double message, but I think we need more leadership in Europe on this part.
Andreas, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, maybe just to round up, I think I can absolutely support what both Emily and Margot just said. Maybe more on a particular issue, our members, principally in the sector, working with derivatives and fractions of certified palm kernel oil, especially outside the food sector, they face problems in terms of availability of the desired material in the required supply chain models, or at a certain time, or at a certain volume. So that still is a problem in terms of availability that sometimes even holds true for the food industry when we talk about flavors or aromas. So there are gaps of availability. But what principally could be done, I mean, we still need to see a higher demand in the private and in the public sector. So not to leave it to the final customers' buying decisions, but to try to trigger generally a higher uptake of that material.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. And I think that actually, it feeds into a lot of the work that we're doing at the RSPO, and actually that INCA is leading, which is the shared responsibility working group, and making sure that, you know, there has been, Emily, to your earlier point when we started out, this conversation where we're talking to producer nations to do X, Y, and Z. And now the conversation has to come back the other way to say, okay, we're trying to do what you're asking. Can you uphold your sourcing policies, your targets? And I think that has to be a conversation, and that there has to be that element of shared responsibility to ensure that the process will be sustainable. People have to be rewarded for the journey that they're taking. And it's not just for palm, it's for other commodities as well. You know, we have a whole list of questions that we have typed out in advance, but I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball and take and combine two questions that we've received from Tim Stevenson and Li Feng Fang of CDP and Tim Stevenson of AAK. And it's about China. And it's about the markets like India and Indonesia. And I kind of want to just dig into that one, particularly as we're just coming off shared responsibility. How do we take some of the learnings and the efforts that we've done in Europe and the United States, and to use one of my catchphrases my team will laugh about, is to lift and shift this to China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia? What are your thoughts? What can we do to learn and what can drive it? Anyone want to start off?
I don't mind going first.
You go.
I think there are two bits here. There's and we'll come back to the role of the government and the regulation, but there's sort of engaging with producer platforms, China and India, Indonesia for the UK, Papua New Guinea is really important, Malaysia, and then obviously the influence they have in Africa is all really important. And there's two, I guess, we have to also remember that these, where we view consumer countries, we're going to reach out and share our lessons learned with other national initiatives. That for Indonesia and India, they're massive consumer countries as well as producer countries. So we've got to be aware of the dialogue we're having when we share lessons and how we engage. We've been reaching out to WWF China, who have a sort of small, a sort of roundtable where they've been trying to get established in the world of palm oil. We've been sharing how we set things up and what sort of codes of conduct we can use. But it's a conversation we've had in the National Initiatives meeting as well. And sort of we know the Amsterdam Declaration is having is how can we build and facilitate dialogue? And I think it starts with a sharing lessons from secretariat. So the people you've got on this call and others, to other secretariats. So sort of some of those conversations of how did you convince people to come together? How do you set a goal? How do you get buy-in? How do you create the safe space that we take for granted because we've been doing this for nearly 10 years? And then once you've done that and you look at the bits that we can work collectively on, we can share lessons, we can sort of then, you know, we're now tackling some of the difficult bits, as Andrea said, but there are some easier messages to get across and without everybody asking for the same requirements in terms of legality and progressing towards sustainability. We don't have to be aiming for the bar, we can aim for the base and bring everybody up. Then I think we start to see some transformative change, because I think where we don't want to lead is to lead to a position where Europe and those of us in are all right and we're all 100% certified, but that there is huge amounts of the production and the market going elsewhere, and they're not asking for the same level of requirements. And as a producer, what you really want is a consistent market and a consistent message and a request for the same, you know, the evidence you're supplying needs to be compliant with a variety of market requirements and regulation. And I think importantly, there's a real role for national standards, MSPO, ISPO, the smallholder work that RSPO is doing to make sure that we bring all producers and we bring the smallholders with us on this process. And that's where we really need to get those producer country platforms on board as well, so that we can work and make sure that we can raise the bar, but bringing everybody along on the same journey.
Margot or
Can I
Andrea?
add to that? I don't want to resonate what you said, but I think, yeah, linking to the title, raising the base and raising the bar, it's extremely important, especially for India and China, that we raise the base. And for this, we need to recognize and work together with producing countries. So the ISPO and MSPO may not be up to the standards of the bar in Europe or of the how we would like to see the world in the future. But if we can't help them with raising the base, and I think also for RSPO this is a difficult topic, we can't provide market access for those smallholders that actually are making the change and putting their money into this more sustainable practices, that finally understand how important this is, because they live in a small world and then they see the bigger picture. But then they also need to be helped to sell their products. And I think the first step would be to recognize all the efforts that are currently going on in Indonesia and Malaysia. The second part is, and we already had discussions with China and India, and I think you all had the same, they're looking at Europe to understand how we did it. And I can honestly tell you the 14 national initiatives that we have in Europe, they're all different. They all work in a different way, but they all have the same goal. So if we bring all the secretariats together, or at least a few, then we can learn from each other and see how that can be done. I think that's a second very important topic. And I think also with the main industries having NDPE commitments that go beyond Europe, it's already sipping through. It's not that you can choose to buy non-NDPE or NDPE if a company has a policy on NDPE on a global level. So I think that also helps. I think that there are three factors in this sense. So Andreas, if you want to add to that.
I think there's not much I could add. In practical terms, this is exactly what we at FONAP also have done in the past. We are sharing information. We can provide practical advice, such as organizational development of national initiatives, different roles, functions of different entities involved. If you talk about secretariat, similar to what Emily said before, but also to reinforce what Margot said. It's clearly our role to deliver proof that we as consumer markets ensure that there is a market access and the market uptake of CSPO. And that is in the end what will convince people to go the same route.
Duncan, just a quick follow-up, just a point that's, when we're talking about raising the base and the whole production system, and I think that's really important when we also think about other uses for palm oil. So, we're talking about food and non-food, but biofuel is obviously significant in the European market, but in China and India, and sort of by raising standards and trying to aim high, you create these weird market distortions, which not only disturb the flow of where the biofuel goes, but we use derivatives of that in our non-food sectors as well. So it's a really important commodity. And I feel that if we can work, as Margot said, with sort of the producers and raising the base, ensuring that's all at least legal and deforestation free, then that is also going to feed into a biofuel sector, which we're not having a conversation about here today, and they've got their own regulations and standards to adhere to. But it's about making sure our entire production system is done in the right way. And what are the ways that we can support that? And if we don't sort of acknowledge and bring with us the sort of biofuel sector in this conversation, you're having sort of half a conversation half the time. So yeah, sorry, just a point to sort of add into the mix there.
No, I think all of you touched on something really important, which is that stepping stone, which is, can the national initiatives become that stepping stone also to the RSPO, which is a higher level of standard, and how we build on that. And I think that's a good segue to also think about, maybe we could also point out some of the specific aspects of national initiatives that have been successful in your experience. Is it the finance sector? Is it the industry considerations? Collaboration with established NGOs? What are some of these levers specifically that have been pulled that really kind of turned the tide for some of the markets? Margot, do you want to start with that one? Yeah,
I can. Of course, it's a difficult question to answer, and you're well aware that all the national initiatives, some are just having just started. Some have very clear commitments. Some have learned from other initiatives and made a full speed start, like in Poland, and then already delivering. I think it's not so much of which industry or which organization is on board. It's more about trust and setting a same goal and following up on that goal and making sure that everybody's on board and nobody's left out. And whether that is 10 members or 500 members, I think that's something you can organize. It's more like, look at the situation that you have in your country, what's important, how can we achieve that goal with the people that are actually willing to cooperate. And it then, like especially in Italy and Spain at the moment, the debate is polarizing a lot. How can we help each other, and how can at the European level and at a national level, also RSPO, help depolarize that debate and create a bigger presence of sustainable palm oil and what it is. And I think, that's also something that I would give to the RSPO. How can you help the countries to tackle that debate, but also to facilitate the achievement of the goals, the common goals that we share also with RSPO?
Emily
right.
or
Maybe I can.
Andreas?
Yeah,
Go
maybe
ahead.
then I can continue. I mean, we as FONAP, I think our success really is linked to the collaborative spirit of our equal members. So, I mean, we have strong consensus-based decisions for long-term commitments. This is clearly a plus. On the other hand side, because of these manifold backgrounds and opinions among our membership, decision-making sometimes takes a bit longer. But in itself, it's a very strong group of organizations which found themselves under this common goal. And this, to us, I think, is the key to success. So as Margot said, it's not really depending on an industry sector, really, but I think the uniting factor is the approach that we are taking and the openness and the willingness to take people on board and move them forward for the next steps.
Emily, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the sort of safe space and the sharing of lessons. And we've seen that, you know, when you get new members coming on board and they'll raise a point or a question. And it's nice when you've got that space where somebody else in the room will stand up and say, oh, we've had that one and we've sort of dealt with it this way. We have two NGOs that come along, one as a buyer and one has always been involved. So we're quite careful on that. So we have a wider outreach of people that we will engage with and keep informed. But the roundtable meetings themselves can be buyer specific so that you can have that place to go, I don't know how to do this. I want to get involved. I want to start. And I think it's really important when you think that it's very difficult when this starts, and we're seeing it in soya and other commodities, to be the first company or the first supply chain to really want to openly talk about what you're doing, because therefore you're recognizing you've got a problem that you're trying to address. And it's much better when you're in a room and everybody feels comfortable to go, yeah, we've got the same thing. Yeah, we're doing it too. So it's providing that. And we also think that working through our associations has been a really important message, because they then disseminate that. Gradually, we've had some of their members join in, but also then the associations are developing codes of conduct and training material. So we're almost training the trainer or supporting, you know, so that in theory, as a group, we should no longer need to be in existence, because the associations or all members in it should be picking up and taking the message forward.
It's really interesting. You both touched on something that was very interesting that I've seen in some of my experience, which is the lack of education and lack of knowledge. There's a lot of companies that want to source the material, they just don't know how. And what I've seen in India, China, and North America is that once you start training, you start doing trainings, and the RSPO Secretariat starts providing some of that information, you start to see uptake. For example, in China, CSPOA has grown from, I think, or the membership of the RSPO specifically, with CSPOA's help, has really grown from like 80 members 2 years ago to, I think, 160 or 170. And I have to believe that a lot of it's due to education. I want to just ask one last question, and then we'll wrap up because we're almost out of time. But you know, one of the things that we are consistently seeing up is these no palm oil statements and the palm free. And I just want to ask one quick question about, you know, how is the market transformation in Europe, in US, or elsewhere in your experience impacted by these types of statements?
Shall I take that one, Emily and Andreas? I think it's very negative. From a business perspective, I think it's a good opportunity. It's a quick win. There's a lot of studies. There's even conferences on no palm or no different ingredients. How that can actually increase the sales of your products and the volume. But what we are trying to achieve is to achieve market transformation. And the no palm oil labels tell you there's something wrong with it, even if there was no palm oil in the product to begin with. So it's a good market opportunity. But talking about market transformation, also the openness of people to start learning about sustainable palm oil, it's a very bad start. And I think we have to address them. And I think I understand RSPO is reconsidering their policy. If we look at the last gap in Europe, and how to tackle it, I think we really have to address the no palm oil labels. It's not that a consumer can choose whether he wants a product with or without palm oil, or with soy or without soy or whatever. But it should not be given and driven by the fact that it would not be sustainable, especially since in Europe we're already at 86%, or in some of the countries almost 95%. It's a nonsense, and it's also regulated in Europe. So it's only helping to distract from the fact that we're already almost there, and we want to close the last gap. So I think it's very important. The second part why it's important is if we talk about raising the base, it's become very political. It's a very sensitive topic in the producing countries. They do not understand why these no palm oil labels are being allowed in Europe, where there's so much now willing to provide sustainable palm oil to the European market. They have the feeling that they're doing it, that it's no sense, because it doesn't matter how much they apply to our criteria, they will be kicked out of the market anyway. So I think it's a very sensitive also topic on the producing country level. So I think it needs to be addressed to close the gap in Europe.
Emily or Andreas?
I can chip in. I think.
Yes, please, Emily, go on.
Do you want to go, Andreas? You can
go. Ladies first, please.
I'd completely agree, Margot, and I think from our side, walking away from the problem doesn't solve it, does it? So I think, it sends this wrong message. It reinforces the confusion in the marketplace from end users and consumers going into a supermarket, sends all the wrong messages. I mean, ideally, if there's somehow you need to label sustainable palm oil on a product if you're going to do it at all, or we have to be very careful about where these free from is very trendy, isn't it? Whether it's free from gluten or free from deforestation or free from something else, will be free from food soon. But they're seen as sort of a negative message, and we're constantly trying to balance that and explore ways of labeling things in a way that inform a consumer to make those decisions. But then at the other end, you can kind of go, well, if the market and the regulation was such that those decisions were taken away from a consumer, then they shouldn't have to worry about them. But then that doesn't stop the fact that there is these logos being put on products that are misinformed and actually create more confusion than they sort of try and do. I mean, we've seen a box of eggs which really don't have any palm oil in them, with a palm oil free logo on the box. So that sort of, it's seen as a positive marketing tool. So that would be my say. We're very much like to be involved and engaged. I do think sometimes bad press, campaigns and stuff is quite good for us, because it kind of makes us all wake up and realize that there's still work to be done. But I think to Margot's point, that it's bad press and it's not helpful.
I fully agree. It's certainly not helpful. Yet, from the, I would say, German market perspective, it is hindering, of course, the communication on the positive aspects of sustainable palm oil. But it seems not to be decisive, really. Otherwise, we would have more problems to explain the raising volumes of sustainable palm oil. So yes, we get into situations where we challenge organizations bringing forward these claims. Yeah, often enough we invite them to talks or to visit our General Assembly or similar things. Usually they don't pop up. And from the experience we have made, this is often a one-off discussion. And then that's it. So they may be able to continue what they do, but we do not really see, I mean, really talking about our perception about the German market, we do not really see that is becoming an increasing and major issue. There are some, yes, and but I think it's really more in the sense of what Emily said. It's a trending aspect, and this is maybe now on a rise. But before that, it was lower, and we strongly assume that it will also decrease over time again. We do not really see a strong followership in that, and a dramatic increase of products with such a label, for instance.
Great, thank you for that.
So this seems to be market different.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. And I think, really very quickly in what I'd like to do is, the UK will be hosting COP26 in November. God willing, everything improves. We'll have a hybrid event, hopefully, at least. Very quickly, each of you, and starting with you, Emily, being in the UK, what does this mean? What is this an opportunity, or what's next for us in terms of these national initiatives, and is COP26 an opportunity for us?
It's a massive opportunity for us, and we've got to really take it and go with it. And I think, to me, it's about talking around sustainable use of our resources, full stop, forests, land use, how we farm, how we consume, how we waste. There's that whole package of conversation. It's all about building partnerships and working collaboratively. And there's a lot of initiatives going on at the moment of how you can build those partnerships and work with not only producers, but key consuming platforms and countries as well. So for me, this is the year for changing the narrative around palm oil, and it's an amazing product, and we should be proud of it when it's done right. And bringing in producers and other consumer platforms and talking about palm oil as part of a sort of agroforestry, part of the environment. It's part of social and economic, and it should be part of the package and part of the solution for improving climate.
Great. Margot.
It's a great opportunity. It's there's a lot happening in Europe at the moment, and it in my opinion, it culminates a bit in COP26. There's also a pre-COP event in Italy, which is interesting. What I think is needed that we follow up on raising the base and raising the bar. In Europe, we may have achieved a very high standard, but how can we raise the base, and how can we bring that together instead of widening the gap between the high bar and the base? So I think that should be our conversation, and we should make it very consistent. Try to make us work together on simple messages that everybody can understand, and simple activities that we can all deploy, so we get the producing countries on board. Because at the moment, it's polarizing, not only in Europe in the debate on palm oil, but also in the producing country. And I would like to come closer again.
Great.
That's a bit my message.
Great. Andreas, your quick statement on this.
Very briefly, surely we also see that as a very, very good opportunity to jointly raise our voice and have a strong appearance at COP. However, that appearance will look like needs to be really seen given the current circumstances. But surely this is a very good opportunity for all national initiatives and beyond to have a common appearance there, and we should use that to, first of all, show what we do, but also get more interest by other parties and convince other parties to join our cause there. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Emily, Margot, and Andreas. Andreas, thank you for sticking with us with the technical problems, and thank you all to our participants. It's late in Asia, and let's wrap it up with a few final thoughts. And some of the big things that I took away from today are that we need to create trust. National initiatives are some of these. It's one way to build trust between both parties on the ground in those specific countries, but also between different regions, so that we can foster that two-way conversation. I think that's a really important point. And then we also have to look for stepping stones and things that we can kind of lift and shift to different markets. And that there is no one size fits all kind of solution, that we're going to have to try and try different types of tactics, and that being first is hard. So it's about encouraging that person in that new market, that new area, to take the first step, and how do we support them? Also, I think what I heard is the COP26 is going to play a very big role, and those NDCs and the SDGs will be extremely important, and sustainable palm oil can play a very important role with that. So with that, I would just like to wrap up today, our February's RT Series 2021. Next month, we're going to dive into a different geography. We're going to look at Latin America, and we're going to look at what has become one of the fastest growing regions in terms of sustainable palm oil. Let's look for successes, why it's happening so fast, and celebrate a little that, but also acknowledge some of the challenges and opportunities that still lie ahead. So again, Emily, Margot, and Andreas, thank you so much. And thank you to all the participants on the line. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.